Welcome everyone to our policy catalog and roadmap process update call. Today we plan to discuss the proposed changes to the development of the annual policy roadmap and catalog with the goal of ensuring that the ISO proposed initiatives align with the stakeholder priorities. In this call, we plan to discuss the annual policy roadmap, the catalog's role, and developing an ISO initiative. So we also plan to give a purpose of the proposed changes as well preview of the proposed timeline that is starting in January 2024. So we thank so much for everyone who has joined us today for pre-registration that we are continuing on with the ISO Stakeholder Affairs. We like to continue keeping you guys all interested in signing up ahead of time and getting that link from either the notice or the daily briefing. And then we also have that list that will be sent out in the next 10 minutes. So those that are in the call may see who is in the call. As well, we'll go ahead and get some housekeeping reminders for this call. It is recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. So this little meeting will be more of an update as well. We encourage a lot of questions, but if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them through the chat or raise your hand. To use the raise hand icon that's located under the lower toolbar, you'll click on that. Don't unmute yourself. We'll go ahead and Michelle, my event producer, will unmute you. At the time of your muting, you make sure to please state your full name and affiliation. As well, for those who submit chat questions, feel free to add your affiliation so we can know who's asking the question as well if it's not added to your title. But if you do experience any technical issues, feel free to send them over to myself, Brenda Corona, or Michelle, my event producer. We will be here to help you on behalf of the Stakeholder Affairs Group. So I'll go ahead and invite our two panelists who are here today. Alyssa, go ahead and introduce yourself and then pass it on to Jillian, who will be kicking us off.
My name is Alyssa Craig-Arnold. I am on the Market Strategy and Governance team with the ISO, and together with Jillian, I will be presenting today on our proposed roadmap and catalog process.
Great, and I'm Jillian Beidler, Policy Integration and Governance Manager at the ISO, and so look forward to going through some proposed changes and process updates with you all on the catalog and roadmap. Thank you for joining, and I'm looking forward to sharing these updates with you. I'm eager to discuss your feedback, both in the dialogue in this call, but also in subsequent comments. Written comments, so we're definitely looking forward to a round discussion today, but also your comments following on to this meeting. I guess we're jumping right in with sort of maybe a bit of a grounding slide, just reminding you of the current catalog and roadmap process that we have in place. So that's a familiar diagram, the process timeline there at the bottom right. The catalog process that we've had in place for many years has involved stakeholder submissions of suggested discretionary initiatives that we accept on a rolling basis with twice yearly publication of the updated catalog. And the catalog here is just this giant cumulative document that sort of accumulates all of these submissions as they are provided to the ISO by stakeholders as well as by folks internal to the ISO. And then on an annual basis, what has been done is that elements of that catalog, along with items that are policy initiatives that are already underway and or that are required by there's some regulatory requirement that we complete them, are assembled onto the policy initiatives roadmap, which looks out for the upcoming 3 years. So this has been the catalog and roadmap process for a long time. But I think we could go to the next slide, Brenda. There have definitely been, I think there are opportunities for improvement. We know that based on our experience within the ISO, but we also recognize that stakeholders have had a lot of concerns about the catalog and roadmap process, and we felt like this is a good opportunity to make some process enhancements that would address some of those. So in particular, we recognize that internal to the ISO, we've had a really a big shift where we're very focused on prioritization, and we feel like the policy catalog and roadmap should really be coordinated with those efforts. In particular, the strategic goals, the strategic planning effort that comes out of those strategic goals, the enterprise roadmap, which is a document that you would not have seen outside the ISO, but what really is the nuts and bolts of the upcoming year, and really reflects the internal management of workloads and all priorities and budget, et cetera. So it's the very detailed effort internal to the ISO to make sure that what is on the roadmap in support of the strategic goals is feasible and all planned out. What we found is that, you know, with 60 policy initiatives or more in the cumulative catalog as it stands right now, it's just unwieldy. It's difficult to get in there and not get overwhelmed by just so many initiatives, a lot of which are outdated, some of which could be combined with one another. And so we just feel like it's time for a departure from that and we wanted to come up with an idea that is leaner and more current to really inform the roadmap process. And then this second major bullet here, I think I've probably already touched on this, but we want to make sure that our policy efforts really reflect the input of stakeholders. And with the catalog as it currently is, as a cumulative document, we really didn't feel like that feedback was making its way as directly and as resoundingly into the roadmap process as it could. So, yeah, the catalog currently feels like an outdated laundry list. The only thing worse than a laundry list is outdated laundry, I guess. And so, you know, because of that disconnect between really current priorities and the roadmap, the stakeholders have felt like the roadmap was largely final by the time we came up with it and didn't have that connection with what was submitted. So that is kind of the lay of the land that we were in when we were working to develop these changes to the catalog and roadmap processes. I think we can go to the next slide where Alyssa's going to take over for a bit.
So our goals for the new process were really driven by wanting to improve on some of the shortcomings of the current process that Jillian mentioned in the previous slide. So we identified a few overarching goals to guide the new process for the roadmap and catalog development, which we kind of provide an overview of here. I think first and foremost, we really want to make sure that we're meaningfully engaging external stakeholders. So we really want to make sure that the final products do a better job of incorporating stakeholder priorities and that we do a better job of really broadcasting to stakeholders where exactly they can participate in the development process of these documents. And I'll be going over in more detail exactly what that looks like through the course of the development of these products in a later slide. And then the second goal is transparency. We really don't want the ISO's policy prioritization process to be a black box, which I think a lot of stakeholders perceive it to be today. And, you know, that's part of why we really wanted to keep the catalog process, but we want to make it a more productive place for stakeholders to really engage and truly help inform its development. And I think as part of that, we want to make sure that ISO stakeholders feel like their access to the ISO is fair and it's equitable in terms of the process to propose new policy initiatives and prioritize those initiatives. So it's really important for us that this entire process takes place in, you know, a public forum and it remains transparent for all stakeholders. And we really are focusing on doing a better job than we have in the past of giving stakeholders a better understanding of how we develop the roadmap and catalog and the internal factors and capacity and strategic planning that really drives the development of some of our priorities. Our third goal here is that we want to make sure that the products are aligned with our internal planning processes. Like I mentioned, we haven't been consistent in really broadcasting what's driving the development of the policy roadmap in the past. So along with that, we've been developing a more robust internal strategic planning process, and we're really focused on making sure that the roadmap and catalog processes are aligned with those internal planning products. And Jillian will be speaking to that a little bit more shortly. And then our fourth goal here is you want a really focused scope for this. As Jillian mentioned previously, it's been kind of broad, a laundry list, and we want to think about the catalog and the roadmap today as the intersection of stakeholder priorities, ISO goals, and strategic goals, and ISO staff capacity. So this really means that we want products that what ends up in these documents really has a realistic pathway for the ISO to actually undertake these proposed initiatives. And then finally, we want to be able to incorporate urgent requests. We recognize that there are a number of time-sensitive policies that policy needs, and that's not uncommon, but they don't necessarily always align with our annual planning process. So we want to make sure that we have a transparent documented method for stakeholders to bring these requests to the ISO's attention so that we can incorporate them into our planning process that takes place outside of our documented annual process. Next slide, please.
Great, and I wanted to say one thing. You know, I think those goals are super important, and I appreciate Alyssa walking through them in detail. And I just wanted to draw out one thing that I made a note of while I was listening, and that is that I think a big part of the transparency is also just having a predictable set timeline for the catalog and roadmap process. We're going to go through that more later on in this slide deck, but definitely want to point out that we recognize that certainty in terms of the timing and when is important for stakeholders to know just, you know, when their input is going to be solicited and when we need to really ask for engagement, when to expect the draft catalog, when to expect the draft roadmap. Those kinds of milestones are really important to have in sort of a routine, predictable way. So I thought I would just flag that as sort of an element, I think, of transparency. Okay, so I think you're getting probably the picture by now that we're really looking at improving the catalog and roadmap process from both ends, both from the internal side and making sure that we're well coordinated, the policy initiatives roadmap is well coordinated with other prioritization efforts within the ISO, but also importantly to look at it from the external side too and make sure that we're having meaningful engagement with external stakeholders. To that end, we want to depart from the rolling cumulative catalog that we've had for time out of mind. We want to establish a new catalog of potential discretionary initiatives each year, an annual catalog that reflects we're going to ask you as stakeholders to submit potential discretionary initiatives on an annual basis that reflect your current priorities and want to make sure that that is a fresh look, a lean look at what is really on your minds as policy initiatives that need to be undertaken to support the strategic goals. The new catalog effort will focus a lot more on integrating priorities from stakeholders as opposed to just being a holding tank for submitted items. So we'll really try to flesh out, you know, a prioritization effort as part of the catalog. I think in the past we've really thought of the catalog as sort of just being a corral full of potential initiatives, and then the prioritization was really the roadmap effort. I think what we want to do is get away from that and really focus on developing an annual catalog of a smaller number of initiatives that we can all discuss the importance of, and try to really have that prioritization exercise as a group in advance of then trying to feed that forward into the roadmap process. I think that sounds like a radical change, but I think as we continue to go through these slides, you'll sort of see how those pieces fit together and this sort of re-envisioning of the catalog and roadmap process. And it's important to point out as well, when we talk about meaningful engagement with external stakeholders, that we look forward to input from the Regional Issues Forum. They are going to have a roundtable dedicated to coming up with and providing advice or input into the catalog process in support of the roadmap process. And that's part of their mandate in advising the governing body. But we also really just look forward to that, the outcome of that roundtable and the input from the RIF as a group of stakeholders. So I think with that, we can go on to the next slide. And we'll start to just talk about how this actually looks. And so I think the first things first, we're going to start off right away in the new year in January. And the idea here is to have some level setting workshop, at least one, where we talk about, what is it what are our strategic goals? So that is the overarching framework for the catalog and roadmap as a prioritization exercise. So the strategic goals will really inform the level setting workshop. In addition, we have to consider what policy initiatives we have regulatory requirement to complete, and what policy initiatives are already underway. There's quite a bit of bandwidth, as you're all well aware, that is already spoken for. So I think that is the purpose of those level setting workshops, is to go, okay, these are our strategic goals. This is what we've already got on our plates. This is what we've already got tentatively on the horizon. And this is what we think we have in terms of room. What else that supports the strategic goals might we prioritize as a group, and start just kind of setting the stage for that in that January timeframe. And Alyssa, I'll let you take this next real meaty chunk here.
Yeah, so the catalog, like we've kind of been discussing, is really going to be the primary product that stakeholders are going to be engaging with to provide feedback on their priorities for discretionary initiatives and communicate with the ISO about how these priorities can fit into the ISO's work plan and roadmap. And I'm going to review exactly how the process will be organized over the calendar year in the next slide, but generally I just kind of want to point out that we want to start the planning process in 2024 with an entirely new catalog and really rebuild it from the ground up. And this is where we're hoping that the ISO stakeholders can provide some feedback. We'll have a comment template on our website for stakeholders to provide written comments, but we'd really like you guys to provide some input on how you'd like us to use the existing policy initiatives catalog. We do recognize that a number of stakeholders have spent a lot of time submitting and developing these initiatives, and that many of them are still potentially relevant and still high priority for some of the stakeholders. But like we've also kind of discussed here, there is a lot of value in kind of starting fresh with a blank slate here, and just allowing stakeholders to resubmit any existing initiatives that they feel like are still relevant today. So if anyone has any immediate thoughts, we would welcome that. Otherwise, feel free to submit some written comments on what you'd like the ISO to do with our existing catalog and the existing submissions in that catalog going forward. So I'll pause here if anyone has any immediate thoughts on that. Otherwise, I will move on to the detailed stakeholder engagement process.
There's no questions at this time, but we will be sending out that attendance report soon. We're just having some technical difficulties, but we'll let you guys know about that attendee list.
Okay, you can go ahead and move to the next slide, please. All right, so I just want to talk through some of the planned points for stakeholder engagement and feedback throughout our annual process. And we're planning to align the new process with the calendar year and have it repeat annually, which, as Jillian mentioned previously, we're really hoping will provide stakeholders with a little bit more predictability and make it easier to plan engagement and effort around this. And, you know, the goal here is really to provide stakeholders with consistent updates, make it clear where they can provide meaningful, useful feedback at critical points in the planning process. Starting with January, we've already kind of discussed this. We're planning to start with kind of a level setting stakeholder workshop. I don't think I need to repeat the information we've already discussed here, but you know, again, the goal here is to provide stakeholders with more transparency about some of the internal factors of the ISO that we're going to be using to guide the development of the catalog and the prioritization, and really set expectations here. And this sets stakeholders up to submit their proposed discretionary initiatives for consideration in February. And the goal here is to really have stakeholder submissions be more narrowly scoped than they have been in the past. And as I mentioned previously, we do plan to have a separate process for stakeholders to submit any urgent requests as they come up. And this is really more for the longer term discretionary initiative requests. And then in March, after stakeholders have submitted their proposed initiatives, the ISO will start doing a prioritization process. So we'll be soliciting feedback from stakeholders on grouping and prioritizing their submissions. So this would include a roundtable with the regional issues forum, which Jillian mentioned previously. And then the ISO will have a stakeholder workshop for all stakeholders to weigh in really early in the prioritization process and help the ISO identify what particular initiatives are important, who might be impacted, how some initiatives can be grouped, things like that. So that's going to take place in March. In April, the ISO will be taking that stakeholder feedback and use that to help kind of finalize the prioritization of the catalog submissions and publish the draft catalog, which will, again, be much more narrow in scope than previous years and represent more of a small number of discretionary initiatives that stakeholders identified as priorities, and that also align with ISO planning priorities. So that will be open for stakeholder feedback in April, and then the ISO plans to update that based on stakeholder feedback and release the final catalog in May. And then after publishing the final catalog, that's when we really start to turn towards the policy roadmap development, and that's more of an internal work plan, and that'll be considering the stakeholder feedback from the catalog, as well as combining that with internal ISO planning processes and some of the consideration that Jillian is going to mention on the next slide with our new internal planning processes. And since this does incorporate a few more kind of internal constraints in the ISO planning process, this isn't the primary stakeholder touch point for providing feedback on discretionary initiatives. That's really going to be in the catalog process early in the year. But stakeholders will have an opportunity to provide feedback in September on the draft roadmap before it's finalized and taken to the board for their review at the end of the year. Next slide, please.
Great. And so, you know, it may have looked in that last slide like we were taking the summer off. There's a big chunk of time between May and September. But rest assured, there's plenty going on this process. This is really where, in those summer months, we are dovetailing together with internal efforts led by our Enterprise Program Management Office, our strategic planning group, even our budgeting group, to make sure that what we are, the process of going from the policy catalog to the policy roadmap is consistent with the efforts that they are doing to, you know, prioritize and plan work as well. And this is all, this is you know, this helps inform their efforts, but their efforts inform ours, and the end product is a much more cohesive and roadmap for policy initiatives that we can be much more assured is actually feasible based on, you know, workloads and internal obligations, things that aren't, you know, visible outside of the ISO, things like just vendor availability or release plans, or, I mean, release plans are visible, but, you know, just trying to really make sure that it's coordinated with efforts internally, that's all going on in the summer, and ensuring that when we get to the fall and we are taking the subset of items from the annual catalog and building them into those swim lanes that we're reflecting the work of all of that planning. And so that's really visible on the, like, it's laid out and in the next slide, actually, I think in a way that's it's pretty easy to see. So Brenda, if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Brenda, can I ask you to, thank you. I know you're multitasking, so I appreciate it. This may be a little bit tough to see. The font got a little small, which is just reflective of lots of things going on, trying to cram it all onto one slide, but the color coding helps a bit. You can see the major policy touchstones are here in green. Each of the dots on the large arrow represents a month. So you can see that in January, those are that's the level setting stakeholder working group that we talked about, which is informed by the strategic goals. And then in orange, you can see where that starts to dovetail with the strategic planning group's efforts. And then we're working through March with the stakeholder meetings and the RIF, input from the RIF roundtable to publish the final catalog in May. And then we get into those summer month efforts, right? The enterprise roadmap, which I mentioned, was the real nitty-gritty internal planning process that looks 1 year out. And even the draft project list there in purple, which feeds into the GMC review. So all of these pieces, you know, have sort of existed in parallel and tried to inform one another in the past, but we're really trying to formalize that coordination so that all of these processes benefit from the important information provided by each individual piece. So again, getting to September, where we were able to then take the fruits of stakeholder labors and the ISO labors on the final catalog, as well as the internal planning processes, and put that all together into a roadmap that reflects those shared priorities as well as the constraints. And then following that up with a stakeholder meeting to get input on that roadmap, which the hope is, of course, that as Alyssa mentioned, that the real prioritization effort, the discussions about, what initiatives stakeholders are eager to see the ISO undertake in that 3-year time horizon, is really, that dialogue really happens in that first quarter in the catalog process. So I think that by the time we get to the fall, that's largely reflected as expected in the roadmap, but we will have an iteration for feedback on the roadmap in the fall before it ultimately goes to the board in December. And then, of course, this would be a rolling process, so we'll expect to start again in January. So that, we'll be continually refreshing, undergoing the annual catalog process once again, starting with those level setting meetings and asking for, fresh submissions for consideration in that February timeframe. So I think this diagram is still very much a working diagram, but ultimately, hopefully, we'll sort of an iteration or maybe a more polished version of this will replace that familiar circle diagram that you've seen for the existing catalog and roadmap process in the past on the website, but really aiming more towards this set of activities in this time frame for the catalog and roadmap process going forward. Maybe this is a good place to pause for questions. Brenda, do we have any questions on the phone?
I don't see any questions in queue, but Michelle, would you be kind enough to tell us if we have any questions in the audio line?
No, there are currently no questions in queue.
Okay. All right, great. Well, then I think we can go to the last slide, which goes over sort of high-level next steps. Of course, there's, the new catalog and roadmap process to look forward to starting in January. But before we get there, we want to do a good job this fall. So that's in sort of discussing those anticipated changes with you and getting your ideas and feedback on them. So that's the purpose of this meeting. And if we hear from you that we need to talk about this some more, refine it some more, we're perfectly happy to have another call or some other forum in which we can talk about those changes. That's why the stakeholder meetings is there. There's an S in parentheses to indicate that we don't want to close the dialogue. We are eager to hear back from you. That said, we're definitely excited to plan the level setting workshop in January and get everyone started thinking about what their high level priorities are, how those map to the strategic goals, and getting ready to submit those for the annual catalog in February next year. And from there, kicking off the process of having the prioritization discussions in support of the next roadmap. With that, I'm going to stop and just see if anybody else wants to add a few words. Otherwise, we've covered the material that we had for today, and if folks don't have any questions now but want to follow up with feedback later, of course, we're all ears and look forward to that. Brenda, why don't you go ahead and see if we can wrap up.
Oh, no, of course. We do have two people on queue. Let's go ahead with Chris Devon. Go ahead, Chris, introduce yourself and your affiliation. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Go ahead, you're unmuted.
I think I was double muted. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. This is Chris Devon with Terrigen. Thanks for the opportunity. I was hoping to maybe try to just understand the process a little bit better, and I apologize if you guys had covered it earlier. But are you going to take written comments on this slide deck and then kind of come back and have another discussion later? Is that what you're envisioning happening?
We had envisioned, yes, taking comments on this slide deck, and I think based on what we hear back from folks today, if we had any particular themes of questions or anything, we were going to sort of tailor a template to that. But barring that, just blanket feedback on this would be, either now in written comments or both would be appreciated.
Okay. And so I did have some thoughts that just initial reactions on the kind of existing process. I think you guys had laid out your viewpoint on it pretty well as far as, there's a lot of good information in those comments and well, items and issues that stakeholders have submitted. I would recommend trying to somehow preserve that stuff. Maybe the idea of putting it into some kind of a matrix would be helpful to memorialize all those things. But I fear if we just move to a new process that a lot of that input's going to get left behind or lost, and then require more work to pull that back in the future. We haven't participated in the past in a robust manner in these discussions as part of Terragen, but I've been in the stakeholder process for a long time, and I think that just personally I would recommend that we try to somehow preserve some of that information, because I think there's a lot of work that, as you guys rightly noted, put into that stuff. So that's just my initial feedback on that. And it would be nice to maybe get a little bit more of a formalized proposal. I know this isn't necessarily like a stakeholder initiative in the sense of having like a straw proposal, but maybe just a little bit more formulation on what might occur would probably get a little bit more feedback, because I'm imagining that at this point you're probably going to get some pretty generic feedback as you try to envision the changes, and we're kind of early in the stage. So I think I would encourage that maybe come back with one more round and then give another chance for written comments on a more fleshed out proposal, if you will, and then go from there. So that's my input. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks, Chris.
Next, we have Kenya from, go ahead and introduce yourself. Public Advocate's Office, go ahead.
Tanya, you're unmuted. You may go ahead.
Hi, this is Kanya Dorland with the Public Advocacy. Sorry. I have a question about when we submit topics for the catalog. We submitted a topic last year or earlier this year for consideration of the competitive bidding process that CAISO holds. We wanted to have a stakeholder discussion on the current restrictions on competitive bidding. And we submitted that earlier this year, and we haven't received any comment on whether that proposal will be considered.
I can't speak to particular submissions at the moment. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but I will go back and look at that. But what this kind of highlights one of the downfalls of the current sort of cumulative catalog and the practice of accepting initiatives on a rolling basis. It really has become hard to keep track and hard to keep current priorities separated out and highlighted in that giant unwieldy document. So what we would be looking for in the new process is a resubmission that we in that February timeframe, and a justification of that. Kind of we'll have some sort of template for submission that will kind of draw out the points that we would want to make in order to kind of have the prioritization discussion around that. So we can touch base offline and see if we can dig into your specific question on a previous submission more deeply, but I think it will be definitely a different process going forward.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the follow-up offline.
Next, we have John Deep from Southern California Edison. Go ahead, John. Let's just test your audio first. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Yeah, so I know you guys mentioned that you guys are going to start off with the new catalog. Does the same, are you guys going to do that as well for the, I guess it was a strategic 3-year roadmap? Is that going to go out as well and start off fresh?
Well, the roadmap has always been a fresh effort. Every time we have prepared a roadmap, you start from scratch. Of course, there are things that are ongoing that are already sort of on the plate, but so, you know, the roadmap has been less of a cumulative product, whereas the catalog has really sort of accumulated a lot of old initiatives that haven't dropped off.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's the reason why I'm asking you, because I know there's a lot of catalog submissions that are very detailed, and from what I remember earlier this year when you guys went over this 3-year outlook and the catalog, a lot of the, I guess, the 3 objectives, like the critical, strategic, and tactical, and all the strategic initiatives such as like price formation, storage modeling, VERS, price formation, enhancements to RA enhancements, all those were very high level, whereas a lot of the items in the catalog are kind of more detailed initiatives, requests from stakeholders. So I know that you guys basically it does seem kind of like whatever is submitted through the catalog will be left, you know, it's basically where all ideas go left, and basically in a long list of laundry, a long laundry list. So I'm just wondering if we were to start this initiative up again and submit catalog items, will it just be in that long list as opposed to actually being on the list that gets implemented within the next 3 years? I'm not sure if
Well,
that's if I made sense with what I just explained, but
sure, I appreciate it. I think it underscores the frustration with what that folks have had with the catalog in the past. So our idea is to get away from that cumulative laundry list and to really solicit the most high priority items. There may be small things that are of high priority to stakeholders that, you know, wouldn't normally be their own initiative. For example, the prioritization process may involve grouping things that together as a suite of changes might support a strategic goal, for example. So the effort will really be to get a fresh set of submissions that reflect the highest current priorities and to work on, you know, having a discussion about how those support the strategic goals. Not everything that's in that annual catalog, I'm willing to bet. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm willing to bet we won't be able to implement everything on that in that annual catalog. There's a limited amount of bandwidth that the ISO has and that stakeholders have. We may find that there are some things that are really, really important to 1 or 2 people, but really don't rise to, you know, the level that we feel like we should undertake them and, you know, use resources away from other things that are of, you know, greater or broader importance. So there, you know, prioritization is a tough exercise. It's going to be a lot of work, and we definitely want to collaborate with you all on it. But the idea is just that it's a lot more collaborative and focused under this new paradigm.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, for what you just said, that's my fear, is that some of the requests that stakeholders are making aren't going to fall under that strategic category, and so here we are. We're just gonna have this exercise where we're including new catalog items, and they're not going to get it. You know, they're not going to be attended to. So that's just something that just something to consider. Something. And hopefully during the prioritization, we could get a tally or maybe a vote on what initiatives that don't fall under the strategic initiatives stakeholders can vote on, and CAISO can assist with implementing or working on. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Do we have any other questions?
Do you have other questions in queue?
We do have a question. Let's go ahead and get Tanisha from Tusco. Yeah, go ahead. Tuscan Flower.
You can hear me? I didn't see it like a thumbs up or something. Okay. Okay. Okay, good. So two questions. Are you able to speak to how the scope of the submittal will change? I think you mentioned that it will be kind of narrowed down now. And I think I just want to make sure I am clear. The annual catalog submissions feed into PRRs, which feed into BPMs. Is that correct? So those are the two questions.
So we're still working on what the submissions in the February timeframe, what will the actual format of that be. But we'll be looking for a description of the policy initiative, the need for it, the anticipated impact, the strategic goals that it supports. We really want to make sure that we're getting some submissions that reflect the level setting exercise that we go through in the January timeframe. Whether that's a template or a set of instructions, that we have quite a bit of time to figure that out yet, but that's, I think that goes partway at least, hopefully, to answering your question. And then in terms of the submissions, we're really talking about policy initiatives. We're really talking about larger changes that would require tariff changes. These are not requested changes to business process manuals. These are really larger changes that would be outside the current structure and really changing the current elements of the market. So really not related to BPMs at this stage. It would be quite a once you get through the policy and you've made you've developed the whole policy, then you start to worry about how that filters down into the BPMs and the tariff and everything. But no, so we're really looking for kind of a different animal at that stage of the process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, everyone. So if there's any more questions, let us know. Feel free to use the raise hand icon. We appreciate everyone's feedback at this time. And then just a reminder, this information is posted under the miscellaneous meetings. So that link was sent out earlier in this chat, as well as the presentations provided. As we go to the next slide, Jillian, Alyssa, are we ready to go to the next few steps for the team?
I'm done with this one, so whatever you have after this, you can take it away.
Okay. So for those, we definitely have to update this slide a little bit, but basically, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, ISO stakeholderaffairs@kaiso.com. I know we had a few questions today, and our team will do our best to definitely reach out and address those other questions that were in the call. But other than that, we will communicate with everyone through a notice for any updates for the policy roadmap and catalog. Just a reminder, we do have a blog that's posted from last time on the 10th. This was in regards to the stakeholder interconnection process from Danielle Osborne Mills, our principal. And so this blog is just representing a little bit about what we're doing within the ISO with everyone. So feel free to check that out. There is more information that we post on our next blog. So we thank so much everyone for participating in today's call. And we look forward to giving you more updates, and thanks so much. And this information is posted as well on the miscellaneous website, and we will try to do our best to kind of keep an communication on what we're doing with submissions and stuff. So we'll send out a notice with that too. But other than that, thanks so much for participating, and we will go ahead and close our call and send it back to Michelle, for my event producer.
All right, that concludes today's conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.